but he was not sure. No one in the overcrowded church knew what he meant by white gardens instead of green, but they felt that the mistake was in some way appropriate, and most of them would remember for the rest of their lives the moment afterward when he had glanced at them in alarm and puzzlement. The stone church in Brooklyn, on one of the long avenues stretching to the sea, was full of firefighters, the press, uncharacteristically quiet city politicians in tropical suits, and the wives and 18 children of the 6 men who in the blink of an eye had dropped together through the collapsing roof of a burning building, deep into an all-consuming firestorm. Everyone noticed that the wives of the firemen who had died looked exceptionally beautiful. The young women, with the golden hair of summer in dark print dresses, several of whom carried flowers, and the older, more matronly women who were less restrained because they understood better what was to become of them, all had a frightening, elevated quality which seemed to rule the parishioners and silence the politicians. The priest was tumbling over his own words, perhaps because he was young and too moved to be eloquent according to convention. He looked up after a long silence and said simply, "Repose of rivers." They strained to understand, but couldn't, and forgave him immediately. His voice was breaking, not because so many were in the church, for in the raw shadow of the event itself their numbers were unimpressive. It wasn't that the mayor was in the crowd. The mayor had become just a man, and no one felt the power of his office. It may have been the heat. The city had been under siege for a week. Key West humidity and rains had swept across Brooklyn, never ending, trying to cover it with the sea. The sun was shining now through a powerful white haze, and the heat inside the church was phenomenal and frightening. 95 degrees, like a boiler room. All the seasons have their mystery, and perhaps the mystery of summer is that it overwhelms with easy life and makes one feel improperly immortal. One of the wives glanced out a high window and saw white smoke billowing from a chimney. Even in this kind of weather, she thought, they have to turn on the furnaces to make hot water. The smoke rushed past the masonry as if the chimney were the stack of a ship. She had been to a fireman's funeral before, and she knew what it was going to be like when the flag-draped coffin was borne from the church and placed on the bed of a shiny new engine. Hundreds of uniformed men would snap to attention, their blue hats aligning suddenly. Then the procession would flow away like a blue river, and she, the widow, for she was now the widow, would stagger into a waiting black car to follow after it. She was one of the younger wives, one of those who were filled with restrained motion, one of the ones in a dark print dress with flowers. She was looking to the priest for direction, but he was coming apart, and as he did, she could not keep out of her mind the million things she was thinking, the things which came to her for no reason, just the way the priest had said white gardens and repose of rivers. She thought of the barges moving slowly up the Hudson in a tunnel of silver and white haze, and of the wind-polished bridges standing in the summer sun. She thought of the men in the church. She knew them. They were firefighters. They were rough, and they carried with them in the church more ambition, sadness, power, courage, greed, and anger than she cared to think about on this day. But despite their battalion's worth of liveliness and strength, they were drawn to the frail priest, whose voice broke every now and then in the presence of the wives and the children and the 6 coffins. She thought of Brooklyn, of its vastness, and of the things that were happening in Brooklyn right then. Even as the men were buried, traffic on the streets and parkways would be thick as blood. 100 million emotions would pass from soul to soul, into the air, into walls in dark hot rooms, into thin groves of trees in the parks. Even as the men were buried in an emerald field, dazzling with row upon row of bone-white gravestones, there would be something of resurrection and life all over Brooklyn. But now it was still, and the priest was lost in a moment during which everyone was brought together, and the suited children and lovely wives learned that there are quiet times when the world is touched, and when that which is truly important arises to claim all allegiances. "It is bitter," said the priest, finally in control of himself. "Bitter that only through windows like these do we see clearly into past and future, that in such scenes we burn through our temporal concerns to see that everything that was, is,